Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we have to talk about the difference between the new car market and the used car market because they have completely split apart. Like, there's always been a difference, but right now the difference is the biggest that it's ever been. Before getting this video though, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post this content every single day. Let's get into it. Now, in a normal market, the new car market and the used car market are actually pretty in line with each other. Like, if one thing happens to one side of the market, it typically will translate to the other side of the market. And that's because, well, everyone that's buying a new car is buying a new car. And most people that are buying used cars are buying relatively new used cars. And so you see this dynamic where as automakers increase the prices on their new cars, that then gets reflected onto the used car market with prices slightly increasing over time. And obviously cars go through their normal depreciation curves on the used car market, but you'll notice that, again, as those new cars become more and more expensive, the used cars also tend to become more and more expensive. But that's obviously not what we experienced over the last couple of years. And that's why the whole system where these markets generally are in line with each other is now completely broken. And this is because the rate of price growth with the used car market far exceeded the price growth with the new car market over the last couple of years. The used car market increased by like over 40%, whereas the new car market, it was a more, reasonable 10 to 15%. Again, depends on the manufacturer. And so what that means is now used cars are completely overvalued. And yes, we will talk about how some new cars could potentially be overvalued at the end of this video. But all you really need to know for right now is, since used cars increased at a rate that far exceeded the price increase of new cars, they have to come down so the markets are back in line with each other. I mean, we were literally seeing used cars go for over their original MSRP, and they were selling for more than the MSRP on new cars that were the same exact model, which again, in a normal market doesn't make any sense, because in a normal market, a new car will be sold for a certain price, and then over time it will depreciate. And if you pick it up used, you're going to be buying it for significantly less than what it was brand new with most cars. And so that's, again, why we're now seeing this huge price drop with the used car market, is it has to come back in line with where the new car market is at with pricing. And this is exactly why I've been saying that used car prices need to fall even more before the used car market is truly in line with the new car market again, because yes, they've fallen by like 20%, but they increased by over 40% over the course of the pandemic. And so we have to get rid of that 40% increase. And then we actually also have to get rid of the 2 years of depreciation that we didn't experience in the used car market that we typically experience. And so we're talking about a decrease of somewhere in like the 50, maybe 60% range with most used cars compared to where they were at the peak of pandemic pricing. And this leads straight into why the new car market is functioning so differently from the used car market, because the used car market is still overvalued. And so dealerships and manufacturers know that they have pricing power. When you have used cars that are still going for close to original MSRP, then of course a dealership or a manufacturer is going to think that, oh, I can charge way more for this new car because it's not used, it's brand new. And so that's why you're seeing the new car market consistently increase in price, whereas the used car market is consistently decreasing in price, because again, the markets are trying to find some type of equilibrium. But then on top of that, we still have all the supply chain constraints within the new car market. Most manufacturers are better off than they were last year, but they're still not in an ideal situation. We, again, are basically set to sell somewhere around 13 million new vehicles this year, which is way down from where it should be, especially to meet demand. And frankly, the more that I talk to people, the more it sounds like manufacturers want things to stay this way, because they really like the pricing power that they have. They like the fact that they don't have to release incentives, and that every single time they build a car, it sells. Because again, right now, if you go shopping for a car, what you're going to find is that you can buy a brand new car for pretty close to the price that you could buy a used one for. Again, despite the fact the used car market has declined, the new car market still hasn't caught up in price to those used car prices with most cars, especially when you take into account wear and tear and mileage and all that. Like, it really doesn't make sense to buy a used car at all right now. And so manufacturers love this whole situation, but that's why you see two completely different markets where people like won't touch a used car with a 10-foot pole, but then they'll still go and pay MSRP or even over MSRP on new cars, and why a lot of new cars are still sold out. Now that leads us into discussing when this equilibrium will be reached, and it's actually really hard to gauge when this equilibrium will be reached because there are so many different automakers here in the US, and there are so many different types of cars sold here in the US. And so I don't think that there is going to be like an overall car market equilibrium day where it's gonna be like, yes, everything has aligned and now the car market is as it should be. It's going to be a thing where it's going to be brand to brand. I think a really good example is if you look at Stellantis brands, so like Dodge, Ram, Jeep, and Chrysler, those dealerships are filling up with brand new cars. And so that product on the pre-owned market is absolutely tanking in value. I mean, I just recently sold my Ram TRX because I saw the writing on the wall and I wanted to get out before the values dropped a massive amount. And that was definitely a good call on my part, because if I had stayed in that truck for any longer, I would have literally lost like probably $10,000+ with everything that's happening on that market. And so it's going to be more of like a localized event where as soon as a manufacturer starts building enough cars to slightly like meet most of the demand for their product, those used car prices are going to absolutely plummet. And then the new and used car pricing dynamic is finally going to line up. It's just not going, again, it's not going to be a thing where it's just all going to come in line with every single type of car. However, the last part of this equilibrium equation is the fact that the new car market could potentially decline in the near future, which would then put even more downward pressure on the used car market, and then that would have to find its new bottom for things to really settle, and then for the markets to finally, kind of come back together. And initially, I didn't think that this was going to happen. I was like, yeah, you know what? The new car market is not going to decline in price. And this is what I've been hearing from manufacturers. This is what I've been hearing from dealers. And I know that some people are like, of course you've been hearing that from manufacturers and dealers because they're on one side of the equation. The buyers ultimately have the final say because they can choose to buy or not. But when I see people going in and still buying cars, and like I said, still paying over MSRP for cars despite everything that we are seeing out in the economy, then that shows that, yeah, there frankly is still demand. Again, the manufacturers are seeing it and the dealers are seeing it. However, the more that I dig into this, the more it looks like there is going to be a ton of demand destruction next year. And so with that demand destruction, that means that, well, there's probably going to be incentives on cars, and some manufacturers could potentially pull back on their MSRP increases where they actually decrease the MSRP on certain vehicles. Again, the example I gave in today's video of a manufacturer that has too many vehicles is Stellantis. They increase their prices by a margin that just doesn't make sense for most of their consumers. And so I think that they might be one of the brands where they actually pull back on pricing. But again, this is going to be a very brand specific thing. And so it's too soon to tell exactly, how many brands would pull back on their pricing, if they're going to pull back on their pricing, and how this would affect the used car market. But it ultimately is always going to be a localized thing, because you're going to see some brands that continue to have pricing power and continue to increase their prices, whereas others, will have to pull back slightly. So how can you use this information to help you out as a buyer? First off, when it comes to the used car market, just avoid it. Like, it doesn't make sense right now. The values have to decline by a lot before it makes sense to buy a used car. When it comes to the new car market, it really is just going to depend, because most of the brands that are having supply issues are still overvalued, in my opinion. What I'm seeing is that people are paying MSRP or way over MSRP on cars that in a normal market do not go for MSRP or over MSRP. And so I don't think it's worth it. And so unless you can basically buy from a brand that has decent availability where you're able to get a really good deal on the car, and a lot of these brands that have good availability, they're offering deals at invoice and sometimes under invoice. I'm seeing it happen all the time right now. Then I would probably just exercise patience with the new car market. Now, although I said earlier in this video, the new car market could see some MSRP decreases because of everything that happens next year and the year after, I don't think that that's super likely, and I don't think that the price decreases would be all that much. I think the most likely outcome for the new car market is that the price increases are going to be halted for some time, and we might see some rebates on cars, especially, again, those manufacturers that have vehicles that are stacking up on dealer lots. But it's really unlikely that we're gonna have a situation where, all of a sudden cars are gonna have MSRPs that are $10,000 less than what they, just went up to over the last few months, or, the last year. And so you might be able to get a better deal next year on some of those cars, but if you can get a deal at invoice or under invoice on a vehicle, with everything that's happening right now, that's actually a pretty solid deal, especially since financing rates are going to be going up in the near future. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's going to make that future car deal that could be a little bit cheaper. Could be, again, is the key word. Probably not make as much sense as what you could get today. That's going to sum things up. I'll see you.